imminent, and then you're going to hire him to kick his ass. Yeah. All right.
I'll find out.
If you hear anything, I mean, if there's anything out of the ordinary,
Yeah. I'll ask my friend.
But yeah, like you said, if you're even if I was greatly attended, you know, spend a lot of time just being down and getting
That's in different mall box.
Hey, John, is there a place?
Today, just today, or?
They may not be up.
What now? Yeah, what's the problem? Yeah, so last week it was someone went from the wall into the extension cord. So I don't know what it is. So the malt box is completely different than what was originally here?
Actually, it might be the same box, but I know they
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so like last week it was someone.
All right, folks, welcome. My name is Jen. I'm from Golden State Times. We are waiting for the State Department press briefing with Heather Nauert. But really fast before we start that, I just wanted to get your help. We have footage of pictures of the gun that was used at the horrible mass shooting in Las Vegas, and we just want to see what type of gun it is. I'm thinking it's a M4, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm going to need your help if you're ex-military or know a lot about weapons. So here is the gun. Let me show you guys real quick. Here is the gun. As you guys can see here, let me put it up a little bit more. So that's the gun. It's an AR-15 style rifle, but what kind is it? Is it an M4, M16? We need help from you guys in identifying what it might be. We know that it's fully automatic, but we don't know if it was made that way or if it's a gun prior of 1986. Because if a gun is before 1986, made before 1986, it can be bought legally with the right paperwork. But if it's an illegal modification, then that's a whole nother ball game. So let us know what type of gun that is. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Excellent. Are you guys going to turn on that light? John, are you kicking on that light, buddy?
Nothing out of the ordinary. That
Hurry up, Paul.
no one else knows of anything out of the ordinary
hurry up.
for today.
Hurry up, Paul. Hurry up. Hurry up.
Yeah, probably.
Hurry up. So this is how you talk to the camera. Hurry up.
Down here.
What are you studying at Georgetown? You like it there? Okay. Good program? Yeah. Are you thinking about grad school, or are you thinking about slumming it in the world of journalism?
I'm figuring out any law school.
Well, this is a much better indication of how things work by looking at it from the journalism side. You get a pretty quick and unadulterated view about how things move, and having Chad is very helpful. He knows how things work around that. Yeah. Do you need the white balance?
Doing it, working through it my own way.
You don't need the white guy balance. You need the white balance.
I already feel like I have the white guy balance.
Y'all good? Everybody good? Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Hello, hello, hello. Mic check. 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 7. Quantum physics. I prefer string theory myself. Good? Did you see that Einstein thing? The Einstein thing? That's a lot of things. Oh, many series.
they're not that expensive. We have to do it something. What size? I'm always above 44. That's suspect.
That group was Collins, Senator Collins.
That did catch me a little off guard. Yeah, that's like an outer edge of my attention span. It's very curious. Android stream I guess it's too esoteric for the movie title. Yeah, he's the schizophrenic sci-fi writer with no thought. Someone doesn't know this so out there trying to watch the process.
actual mall. Oh wow.
There's a right and a wrong way.
Yeah, no, it's like there's a lot of like
With everything, there's usually a pretty big gray area. There's razor thin strip misbehaves. He just got the cast taken off today. I think he's trying to talk to them and make sure they know that you can't run and stuff. He comes back. So they don't give him anything where he's gonna get in the way and get worse. He should be back soon though.
Sign up for the FAA's long-term team service.
I mean, I would probably do the same thing. Wouldn't you?
note, the briefing will probably be starting closer to 2:30 today. Thank you for your patience.
No, I don't think it ever does, honestly. Yeah, yeah. No, no. I think it that's the way I do it. Celebrity presidential you get kicked off. Well, that makes me feel safe since I'm target number one before. I worked 2 days from target number 1 of the movement. So, I worked a couple of people for and I'm going down to the north of the building. If I can survive through it, I mean, maybe I'll survive the last wave. I'll wait 24 hours while grabbing pieces of ramen and some water. I'm gonna die. I'm just having this probably die after. I mean, the sodium ain't gonna kill me. It is, but it's risky. It's the whole basic of life. diplomacy. I don't even think it was a Cuban government behind it. Well, you want the toll? Yeah.
What is the alternative that we can recognize on the Cuban Gulf?
No, I don't think so either. Yeah. No, I agree. It's just like, well, you want the state policy number? Like where somebody said that there was a road element. I just think of this. It's either Russia or the North Korea. That's the only two. Well, to break off relations with the U.S. I don't know. I mean, they want to constantly. Well, the thing that Putin never has a motive. He doesn't. Putin is great short term. Yeah, I think so. And he's a great short term thinker, but he never thinks about long term. Like the Russian military, he didn't expect the Senate to add sanctions. He didn't expect Trump to dilly dally on the Egypt. He just expected Trump to just do this because, and then he didn't consider, oh, maybe there were other implications. Oh, yeah. Because he hates them. But he didn't think about what would happen afterwards. That's the way I see it, at least. But, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a good possibility, too.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you. God bless
probably not until it's done. I used to not believe that, but never underestimate these. We did that in 2016. That was a bad mistake.
I was going to say that would be difficult. You're such a
I think you're right. Yeah, but I think that's what he wants to know. He doesn't care about anything else. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Lucky doesn't really have to work on the party on the right before I don't know, what would you be trying to do with that, like the HR? That would be so embarrassing. Maybe keep on using one. And his nuclear arsenal, what have we done with our lives? Where is our nuclear arsenal? All I want for Christmas is my own road nation state and a nuclear arsenal. And that's so much. There's so much going on this morning. Yeah, I think so too. And we'll see. Oh, I'll see maybe the world's just very fast.
Very short time.
He's not going to answer if you won't know. Go for it. Drop away. You actually pulled.
Hey Josh, how did your ring go?
Oh, tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow?
We're just promoting it.
Good promotion.
So that's great. I still don't
Are
know
you
what.
worried about all that
What's
stuff?
going on? It's the quintessential question in life, right?
Just know what they all turn into.
A lot of crazy people. I assume you read it.
What?
I read it.
Yeah, I've never seen one. I've only read about Reddit AMAs.
Okay.
I've never actually participated in it.
Find out too.
Do you select questions?
I think so.
I do. You come in and you look pick them.
I guess. I mean, if you're bombarded with like 100 questions, it's not like you can answer.
Is it like I press star one?
Yeah, you look at the
No,
queue
you
like.
better figure this out by tomorrow.
Hey, thanks for doing the Reddit.
I read it. I was on for the call this morning, but not every single person had to take the 2 seconds to say, thanks, hello, thanks a lot for doing this call. I really appreciate it.
I am now a standard good morning and then a question.
I don't see a point in everybody thanking them for doing the call.
I did it today because I noticed everybody
Well, I'm
was
not,
doing it.
no, I'm not this as
No, you
an
do it, but you
I'm
know,
not-
I just see what you do.
To me, it's
everybody thank you, so.
it's like their duty to do everything. It's not like a big
Skip all that.
Just get right into it.
Yeah, let's just do this.
It's like kind of like New Jersey, how you doing? Because when you ask someone here, like, how you doing? They don't answer it. Like, hey, like, how you doing? Fine, how you doing? And then you just get right. It actually answers the question.
Yeah, like what's
Yeah, how you doing? How you doing? There's never an answer. Thanks for doing the call. Thanks for doing the call.
Thanks a lot for doing this call. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. I think it's every single question that we get called.
Thanks for
Big happy. So we can break them.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's their duty.
I don't think they're like that, but you know, I'm just here.
Hi. Hi, everybody. How are you today? Good to see you. Okay, a couple things I want to start out with, and let me thank you all many of you for joining us for our call this morning on Cuba. As you know,
How are you today?
most of you by now, the Department of State informed the government of Cuba today that it was ordering the
Okay,
departure
couple
of
things
15
I
of
wanna
its
start out with.
officials from its embassy in Washington, D.C. That decision was made due to Cuba's inability to protect our diplomats in Havana, as well as ensure equity in the impact of our respective operations. On September the 29th, the department ordered the departure of non-emergency personnel assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Havana, as well as all of their family members. Until the government of Cuba can ensure the safety of our diplomats in Cuba, our embassy will be reduced to emergency personnel to minimize the number of diplomats at risk of exposure to harm. The decisions do not signal a change of policy or determination of responsibility for the attacks on U.S. government personnel in Cuba. Investigations into those attacks are still ongoing. Regarding the attacks, there are now 22 people who have been medically confirmed to have experienced health effects due to the attacks on diplomatic personnel in Havana. The Cuban government has told us it will continue the investigation into the attacks, and we will continue to cooperate with them in this effort. We will also continue our own investigation into the attacks. As I've mentioned before, if those numbers do change in terms of the number of Americans who have been affected, we will certainly bring that to you as soon as we can confirm it. In addition to that, some news coming out of Iraq today, and I want to say how deeply saddened we are as a U.S. government to learn of the death of the former Iraqi President Jalal Talabani. He was a true statesman and a leader for all Iraqis. President Talabani was elected after the fall of Saddam Hussein, and we remember his sincere partnership with the United States during his terms as president from 2005 to 2014. President Talabani is survived by his wife and his two sons. We want to send our sincerest condolences to the family of Mr. Talabani and the people of the Republic of Iraq as they mourn during this time. In addition to that, something going on here at the State Department today. The State Department is holding the 6th U.S.-Bangladesh bilateral security dialogue. That dialogue reflects our growing security relationship with the government of Bangladesh and our shared commitment to peace and prosperity in the region. Discussions today will focus on expanding our partnerships in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, peacekeeping, defense, trade, military cooperation, counterterrorism, as well as maritime security and other regional issues. In addition, the two sides will discuss the situation in Burma and the more than 500,000 Rohingya who have fled to neighboring Bangladesh. The United States is deeply troubled by the violence in Burma, and we applaud the government of Bangladesh's generosity in responding to the humanitarian crisis and appreciate its continued efforts to ensure assistance reaches the affected populations. Now I think it's an appropriate time to just remind you of the $95 million that the U.S. government and taxpayers have contributed in the year 2017 to internally and externally displaced people in Burma and in Bangladesh, since they have accepted many of the Rohingya. And we want to just thank them for their support in the government of Bangladesh. Finally, something I would like to clear up, and then we'll get started with your questions. There was a vote at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and we have seen a lot of reporting about that, press releases that have criticized the U.S. government's vote at the Human Rights Council on the question of the death penalty. The headlines and much of the reporting that has come out of that has been misleading. As our representative to the Human Rights Council said on last Friday, the United States is disappointed to have voted against that resolution. We voted against that resolution because of broader concerns with the resolution's approach in condemning the death penalty in all circumstances, and it called for the abolition of the death penalty altogether. We had hoped for a balanced and inclusive resolution that would better reflect the positions of states that continue to apply the death penalty lawfully, as the United States does. The United States unequivocally condemns the application of the death penalty for conduct such as homosexuality, blasphemy, adultery, and apostasy. We do not consider such conduct appropriate for criminalization. Okay? I hope that's clear. With that, I'll take your questions.
Thanks. I have a very extremely brief logistical thing, and
Sure.
I think I know the answer,
On
which
what?
is you're not going to have a comment on it. I just want to know if the State Department has any response, or the administration more broadly, to the lawsuits that have been filed now against the latest version of the travel ban. And I'm sure you don't. I just want to get it out of the way.
So that would now be a matter of pending litigation, and so
Just say that.
There you go. Matter of pending litigation.
So you have no comment.
No comment on it.
All right.
Thanks.
Can I go to Cuba for a second? So I'm still confused about this. On the call, the senior official said, and you have just said, that, quote, we will need full assurances from the Cuban government that these attacks will not continue before we can even contemplate sending people back or allowing them to have their people come back here, right? That is correct?
Yes.
Haven't the Cubans already given you their full assurances that these attacks won't happen? That they have nothing to do with them and that they do everything to protect their...
I think we have... Let me go back to the Vienna Conventions. And the Vienna Conventions calls for the host country, Cuba in this example, to ensure that our diplomats and our diplomatic community is safe. Cuba is not living up to that. We cannot continue to allow our personnel to serve in Cuba when they are very clearly in harm's way. We just raised that number, unfortunately, to 22 today. Our folks are in harm's way. Cuba has a responsibility to protect against that, and they are clearly unable to do so.
But, I mean, are you asking, what makes you think that they are able to offer assurances that will satisfy your concerns?
Well, if this kind of activity stopped, if we didn't have this happening to our community down there, then perhaps the situation would be very, very different.
Let me put it this way: recognizing that this kind of thing hasn't happened here systematically. I mean, is the U.S. government in a position to absolutely guarantee the safety and security of every single foreign diplomat on its soil?
Look, we do our very best. And
Right.
that's exactly why when we noticed that there was something going on and started to put those pieces together, Secretary Tillerson made the decision to bring our people home.
So the thing is, you don't believe the Cubans are able to.
Clearly they're not able to.
Or they don't
Clearly they are not able to, or they will not. I don't know which it is. That is not a State Department official position. But they are clearly not able, or they're clearly not able to make sure our people are safe, and that is exactly why we had to bring them home.
So is Cuba in violation of the Vienna Convention?
You know, I think that I would leave that up to the lawyers to make that final determination.
made
But
the
I will just say
determination.
that they have a responsibility to keep our people safe. And we say very, very often here, the safety and security of U.S. personnel, including U.S. citizens abroad, is our top priority.
But your conclusion now, as of now, is that they are in violation of the Vienna Convention.
Look, I think that would certainly be something that our lawyers would be looking at. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to delve into that area, but they do have a responsibility, and I'll just leave it at that. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks. But a few questions of
Logic here. If you're making it clear by taking this action that Cuba can't guarantee the safety of diplomats, but the U.S. still has personnel there, doesn't that tell everybody that those people are still...
Our policy and our policy on Cuba has not changed. We have diplomatic relationships with Cuba. We recognize that at this time there is a need to keep a post open there with a skeleton crew handling emergency type issues down there. You know, frankly, our folks, our State Department personnel, want to serve in countries all around the world. We have many of them who are serving in very dangerous capacities, and they don't get enough credit for doing this incredible, amazing work on behalf of U.S. citizens. So we do still have folks down there, certainly, but that is considered the essential personnel, and everyone else we brought home.
Have certain actions been taken by either the U.S. or Cuba or both to change the situation, to make those diplomats now safer than they were, say, a couple of weeks ago?
The trouble with that is we don't know what is causing this. We don't know who or what is responsible. That has not changed. I'm not going to get into the details of the investigation. Frankly, I don't have the details of the investigation. That's something handled out of the FBI, although our diplomatic security is certainly very involved in that as well. But that is all ongoing, and we just don't have enough information yet.
Well, it sounds like you're saying no, that they're still living and working as they were. I mean, there hasn't been any special...
To my understanding, but I'm not going to get into the security posture of our people there. I mean, that is the number one issue, trying to do as much as we can to keep our people safe. There is still an ongoing investigation. We know, and we've talked about this, the most recent attack was in the month of August. So we need to keep probing and figuring out what on earth has been going on.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, without giving away details that would shed too much light on the security posture, based on what you know, have you been able to take any action for those diplomats that you feel makes them safer than they were before?
I think that's something that I'm just not going to get into, simply because we don't want to give up what exactly we may or may not be doing to help protect our people. Safety and security, top priority. This is not something that we wanted to do. We don't want to have to bring our American personnel home. Frankly, our American people want to serve down there. They believe in their mission there in Cuba. This is not a choice of theirs necessarily, although we certainly allowed some who wanted to come home. But we're effectively forced to bring people home because we could not ensure their safety and security.
So the ultimate goal of expelling these 15 Cubans is what? Is it, I mean, what's the goal there? What's the ultimate objective in having them leave?
Well, to reach an area where we have certainly been harmed in our ability to do our jobs down there. Okay, and now Cuba, we have this, not reciprocity, but something of similar sorts, where they don't have the ability to conduct their operations just like we do.
So it's a punishment.
No, this is not a punishment. This is not a punishment. Cuba, we are not going to say, is responsible for these attacks. Let me be clear about that, okay? And I think we have. We have consistently said there is an investigation ongoing. The Cuban government knows that. We've made that clear to the Cuban government. We are not assigning any blame. We don't know who or what is causing this, but I'm going to say one last time, and I don't want to take any more questions on this issue. Cuba has a responsibility under the Vienna Convention to ensure the safety and security of our diplomats and our diplomatic families. And let me leave it at that. Hi.
On Iran.
Hold on. Anything else on Cuba? Okay. Cuba?
Cuba.
Okay.
Cuba.
Hi.
Hey, Heather. You mentioned that the U.S. would consider restoring staffing levels both here for the Cuban government and in Cuba for the U.S. government if these attacks stopped. These are fairly intermittent. The last one happened a couple of months ago. Is there a time frame it would need to stop? Since we have so few details on exactly what's causing this, could this be a suspension that could be indefinite if it doesn't happen for 6 months or a year?
I think you're going to know my answer to this. Hypothetical. So that's just a hypothetical. Look, I understand you have to ask that you want to know that. We just don't know yet. The investigation is ongoing. We won't know until we get further down the road to hopefully figuring out what has caused this, and then we can reassess. Okay? Anything else on Cuba? Okay.
Regarding the visas.
Regarding the visas?
Yes, the
for
visas.
Cuba?
Yeah,
Hi, ma'am. What's your name?
I'm from Radio Marti.
Okay,
My name
welcome.
is Carmen. Thank you.
Hi, Carmen.
You have a reduced staff, and you have you have Cuban citizens who have applied for visas to the United States. You have two categories. You have the cultural exchange, who are people who want to come here and have, obviously, cultural exchange. How will they get their visas? But you also have family members who are trying to reunite with their families here in the United States. How do they apply? The State Department has been linking the possibility of people going online. There's hardly any internet connection in Cuba, much less that people would have computers to access the applications. How will this be handled?
Sure, and a legitimate question. Our limited staff down there is able to handle emergency assistance to U.S. citizens in Cuba. That has to be our priority, to be able to manage things for U.S. citizens there in Cuba. In terms of the visa processing, we've suspended that for now. Some of this is going to be, we'll have more information for you in the coming days, but the processing in Havana for non-immigrant visas, they are allowed, they may apply at another U.S. embassy in another country or another consulate overseas. And so that's the situation for now. Look, the reality is this is not our preference. We didn't want to have to bring our folks home. They want to be there serving U.S. citizens and also the Cuban community and those who want to come here to the United States. But the unfortunate reality is we just can't take that risk with the safety of our Americans. Okay. Anything else Cuba related? Okay. Go ahead.
The United States has been unable itself to determine up to this point what is causing this. Why would are you saying the Cubans are able to do so? What if they're not able to do so? How could they not look upon these expulsions as punishment if they're not able to assess what's been going on either?
Well, our conversations with the Cuban government, I imagine, will be ongoing. We still have a diplomatic relationship, and we still have a presence there in Cuba. They have a very clear obligation to keep our folks safe. If the situation were reversed and we were here in the United States, I think you all would be asking me a whole lot of questions demanding that we protect the personnel. And why on earth, America, can't you figure out what's going on with this other diplomatic community hosted here in the United States? So let me just leave it at that. Okay, let's.
Do you know what your answer would be to those questions?
What do you think it would be?
This is a domestic issue. It's not a State Department issue.
Okay,
So go
well,
ask somewhere else.
maybe that would be the case, but that's a different situation. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on from Cuba. Okay.
Cuba follow-up, just on the 15 people that
Yes.
you expelled. How did you come up with that number and the names that you gave?
So we gave the Cuban government, when our officials spoke with them this morning, we gave the Cuban government a list of people. Those people have, I believe it's 7 days to head home from today. They were picked on I'm not going to get into how exactly these were all picked, but we provided those names and we expect that the Cuban government will fulfill that. Okay?
They're not directly tied to these attacks, are they? In any way?
These are people who were here.
I understand.
Just
they
as
were picked at
look,
random.
Saeed, let me be clear. We don't know who or what is responsible for these attacks. Okay, this is the final Cuba question. We don't know who or what is responsible for these attacks. The people serving here in their embassy did what we believe some of the similar jobs as our folks down in the embassy in Cuba. We have a reduced ability to do our work in Cuba because of the attacks on our Americans, okay? They now will have a reduced ability to do their jobs as well. Okay, let's move on to something else. Hi. Yeah, sure.
Would you and the State Department say, as Secretary Mattis said today, that staying the JCPOA would be in the U.S. national interest?
Yeah.
Is this a position you
So
you
I'm
share?
certainly familiar with what Secretary Mattis said on Capitol Hill today. Secretary Mattis, of course, one of many people who is providing expertise and counsel to the president on the issue of Iran and the JCPOA. The president is getting lots of information on that. We have about 12 days or so, I think, to make our determination for the next JCPOA guideline. The administration looks at JCPOA as the fault in the JCPOA as not looking at the totality of Iran's bad behavior. Secretary Tillerson talked about that at length at the UN General Assembly. So did the president as well. We know that Iran is responsible for terror attacks. We know that Iran arms the Houthi rebels in Yemen, which leads to a more miserable, failed state, awful situation in Yemen, for example. We know what they're doing in Syria. Where you find the Iranian government, you can often find terrible things happening in the world. This administration is very clear about highlighting that and will look at Iran in sort of its totality of all of its bad behaviors, not just the nuclear deal. I don't want to get ahead of the discussions that are ongoing with this within the administration as it pertains to Iran. The president has said he's made his decision, and so I don't want to speak on behalf of the president. He'll just have to make that determination when he's ready to do so.
So he gave his position, but you won't give yours.
Pardon me?
He gave his position, but you won't give.
And Secretary Tillerson believes that we have not looked at the totality of Iran's bad behavior around the world. But the Secretary has talked about that quite extensively. He did his press conference in New York during the UN, where he talked about how the JCPOA is incomplete. And that's one of the words he used to describe it.
Can you think of any other countries that description where X is present around the world, there are bad things happen? Can you think of any other countries that might apply?
I think I just named a few. Yeah, and you could ask the families of our Beirut bombing victims back in 1983. Who was responsible for that? I think that they would tell you exactly Iran is responsible for that. Another one I would mention, Matt, since we're deciding to be snarky with this, Iraq. Okay, ask the families of U.S. military enlisted and officers who've been killed in Iraq because of Iranian militia.
You missed the point. I'm not. So you're saying that wherever Iran is present, there are often bad things happening. Well, there are other countries for which that kind of a statement would apply to too, wouldn't it?
I think Iran is a pretty good example of bad things following that regime.
But they're not the only ones. Anyway, on the JCPOA specifically itself and Secretary Mattis's comments. So are you saying that the JCPOA in and in itself for the nuclear concerns is okay, but its problem is only that It doesn't cover the other things?
We have certified that in the past.
Right.
We have about 12 days or so before that needs to determine.
Purely
in the
on
past,
the nuclear
issue. We have said in the past that they complied and they received their recertification.
Purely on the nuclear matter, though, is it okay in your mind?
We did certify the deal. We did certify the deal. And the IAEA is responsible for conducting all its inspections and all that kind of jazz. Okay.
Except that the Secretary has talked about their violations of the preamble of the JCPOA.
Yes.
Except the preambles are not subject to enforcement under international law.
Look, there's the whole preamble that talks about the international security and stability that Iran is supposed to contribute to, and they're clearly not doing that, and that's when we talk about it being in defiance of the spirit of that law. Okay, but we've been over this. You know what? I'm not going to.
Under international law.
You know what? I'm not. You're not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get into that with you. But we've been clear of saying this. I don't want to beat a dead horse on this issue. We've talked about this again and again and again. Okay.
Why don't you? If the problem is this other behavior, which is very understandable. Why don't you leave the JCPOA intact to deal with Iran's nuclear issue and then develop a new set of sanctions for the other behavior?
Well, last time I checked, I'm not a national security advisor to the president, so I'm just here working on behalf of the State Department. The president will be the one who gets to make his determination, and we'll wait for when the president is ready to do that.
Can I follow up with an Iraq question?
Yeah, we're done with that one? Okay, let's head over to the Iraq.
Okay, John Hanna, who worked in this building, and he was later Dick Cheney's national security advisor, has an article in Foreign Policy which you may have seen.
Okay.
And it said, it says, for those who haven't seen it, that in key respects you were right about the problems that the Kurdistan independence referendum would cause, but also maybe you made things worse by being so vociferous publicly about that. And he says it's time to move on. It's important to deter aggression, prevent crises, and above all, to start negotiations. What would be your comment?
I think the last part that you referred to, we would certainly agree with. That we would call against and oppose any type of violence on any side in Iraq. We want a stable, unified, democratic Iraq. And that has not changed. That is not going to change. We don't want any violence on any sides, whether it's in the north or whether it's with the government of Iraq. We feel that both parties, the Iraqis and the Kurds, should sit down and have a good discussion about this and what they want for the future of their country.
Are you prepared to facilitate that in any way?
We have talked about that. We have not been asked. We've not been asked to facilitate any conversations. But if we were asked, we would provide assistance if they wanted us to.
How about supporting French President Emmanuel Macron, who's indicated he would do such a thing?
I'm not familiar with what President Macron has offered to do with regard to that, so I just can't comment on that. Okay. Anything else? Anything else on Iraq?
The Iraqis laid out a set of conditions to start negotiations. Among them is to nullify the results of the referendum. So would you support that?
Look, we don't recognize the referendum there. We asked the government of Iraq to not hold that referendum because it would be destabilizing, and we have certainly seen that to be the case. This has been destabilizing, and you could just look at the headlines coming out and some of the threats that country and the region has now faced. This is without a doubt destabilizing. Okay. Okay. Anything else on Iraq?
Yes.
Hi.
Just on President Talabani's death.
Yes.
The Kurds have announced a 7-day mourning for a funeral for him, but a lot of his friends and loved ones who are abroad are finding difficulties of returning to Kurdistan because of the flight ban. Are you calling on Iraq to, at least momentarily, resume flights to Kurdistan?
You know, that's a good question on whether or not those individuals should be able to fly back to observe and be a part of his funeral. I had not thought of that. Let me look into it and see if I can find something for you on that. I'll do my best, certainly, okay?
One more question. The statement by Secretary Tillerson called the referendum illegitimate and the results of the referendum illegitimate. But a lot of people say the United States had no observers, election observers in Kurdistan. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, look, because Iraq has a constitution, and in Iraq we have consistently called for a stable, unified, democratic Iraq. We want folks in Iraq, and it's not just the United States, goodness. I mean, if you look at all of the members of the de-ISIS coalition, they have called for the same thing. I think there are now 72 members, 68 of that are states or countries who agree with us on that. This would be a destabilizing activity to have the referendum at the time. So it's not just about the United States.
What is the measurement you used to call it illegitimate? Why?
Because it was against what the Iraqi government had called for. And the focus needed to stay on defeating ISIS. Now the eye has been taken off the ball, which is ISIS. Okay? And now we're seeing all these other headlines, which frankly we don't want to see. Okay? Moving on from Iraq. Hi, North Korea.
I just wanted to follow up on some of the contradictions from the weekend. In his press avail, the secretary said, when envisioning the idea of talks, he said, the first conversation is around what do you want to talk about. Later, you tweeted that diplomatic channels are open for Kim Jong-un now. They won't be open forever. Then the White House spokeswoman said, we've been clear now is not the time to talk, and the only conversations would be around Americans who have been detained. Now is not the time to have any other conversations. So
that is the same thing. When Sarah Sanders said now is not the time to have conversations, that is the same thing that you have heard me say. That is the same thing that you've heard Secretary Tillerson, Susan Thornton, and others in this administration say. Now is clearly not the time to talk. When they are engaged in ballistic missile testing, when they're engaged in other types of testing, they are sending us a very clear example, a very clear sign that they are nowhere ready to talk yet.
So, but when the secretary said that he wants to have a conversation with the North Koreans about what do you want to talk about, he's not actually saying that he wants to have that conversation now. He's just speaking in hypothetical terms.
And that is consistent with what he has said in the past and what we've always said. I mean, yes, at some point, of course, we would like to sit down and talk with North Korea, but now is not the time to do so. They're doing too many horrible activities to folks in the region and people around the world. This is another example where I say, the entire world agrees with us. The entire civilized world agrees with us that the DPRK, that Kim Jong-un's activities and actions are horrific. They're destabilizing. They frighten their neighbors and they frighten the world.
One more question. So when he says,
Michelle, to your point, when they're shooting off weapons, when they're launching weapons, and they're doing this kind of testing, they are not ready to talk. What country would reward them with a conversation when they're engaged in those kinds of activities? We certainly wouldn't.
But when he said in that press avail, stay tuned, that the U.S. is probing, I mean, that was sort of interpreted as a somewhat hopeful comment. He's saying stay tuned, so we should not interpret that as to stay tuned, there might be something coming down the pipe.
I think you all are trying to, and I'm not assigning blame here, but trying to pick apart the word choice entirely too much. Our message hasn't changed. The policy hasn't changed. We believe that the sanctions are starting to have an impact. It's slow. It's not an overnight thing. We've talked about that a lot before. But the sanctions, and we've ratcheted up the pressure, are starting to have an impact. We had some news come out earlier this week that Italy decided to, I believe it was, kick out North Korea's ambassador. The Vatican has indicated that they wouldn't accept the credentials of the person who was set to become the incoming ambassador to the Vatican. Malaysia, we had some news late last week about the same thing. All of that is starting to have an effect. They're not huge things in each one, but all added up, they're starting to have an impact, and that's going to take some time. And I think when the Secretary talks about signals, signs, probing, we're trying to watch to see what the reaction is going to be. Is less money going into North Korea? Yes, we know that. We know that it's having what we would view as a positive impact, because the less money that goes in, the less money they're able to use for their nuclear ballistic missile testing.
Just the last question. Yeah. You also tweeted DPRK will not obtain a nuclear capability. Is it the U.S. belief now that North Korea does not have a nuclear capability?
So I think we have been clear all along, and as some of you have probably noticed, tweeting only allows 140 characters. So you can't always explain everything in as great of detail as perhaps you would like. And Many folks were only too happy to have fun with me on that one. But we've made it abundantly clear that we will not allow the regime to gain international legitimacy that it tries to seek through its unlawful nuclear and nuclear weapons programs. Look, they want to be acknowledged as a nuclear state. That gives them a whole lot of prestige. We try not to give them that prestige that they want. Okay, we're trying not to do that. But it's clear, and this message hasn't changed. You've heard me say it a million times. We will not accept a nuclearized North Korea. We will not accept it as a nuclear armed state. We remain firm in our opposition to their pursuit of nuclear and ballistic missile weapons.
So are you saying then that Twitter hasn't upgraded you to the 280?
They haven't updated me to the 280.
And then following on that, does that mean that you think that 140 character tweets are perhaps not the best way to convey foreign policy messages?
Matt, I'm not
just from the spokeswoman of the State Department, but maybe from people who hold elective office.
I'm not going to touch that one. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on North Korea today?
Yeah. In these diplomatic channels where the United States has discussed the 3 Americans still detained in North Korea, do these diplomatic channels, have they provided access for the protecting power there? Have they been productive? And have the conversations strayed beyond the 3 Americans detained there?
So the answer to your question, we spoke to North Korea regarding Otto Warmbier's case. And that's a productive channel. We still have 3 Americans who are being held in North Korea. We don't have a diplomatic presence there. We have to rely upon the Swedish government. They've been tremendous in terms of their assistance to us. That channel does exist. That's certainly not something that we would keep a secret. We will continue to maintain that channel, especially as it pertains to getting information about our Americans being held there.
Has it been productive and have discussions moved beyond?
I think it's been productive in that, A, we know we have a line to them if we would have the ability to have a new conversation, a fresh conversation about our Americans. They also know that they have a line to us. But I want to be clear, we're not engaged in any talks beyond Americans being held there. Now is not the time to have a talk with North Korea. I've said that all along. The Secretary has said that all along. Our experts here have said that along, and that's been echoed by the White House.
Afghanistan?
So we were... Yeah. Let's one more thing in Afghanistan. Hi.
So we were told those channels are for humanitarian purpose.
Yes.
When was the last time it was used? Was that after Otto Warmbier's release?
I'm not sure. I would imagine that were the case, but I'd just have to check. I just don't know offhand. Okay. And some of those would be diplomatic conversations as well, which we wouldn't divulge.
Are they all in New York?
That I don't know. We do some of that out of New York, yes. But beyond that, I'm not aware.
When you say that now is not the time to talk because they've done nuclear tests and they're testing missiles, can we take it that if they were to suspend that behavior, that the United States would then be open to dialogue with the North Koreans?
Well, I'm not going to state what our expectations will be at this point. At this point, okay, they are clearly not ready to sit down and talk, okay? Clearly not ready to do so. And I've said the same thing here for months and months, so I'm not going to go back and repeat that once again. Let's move on to Afghanistan. Yeah, sure.
Is it still the U.S. position that there needs to be some type of reconciliation between the Afghan government and the Taliban in order to have peaceful Afghanistan? Is that correct?
Yeah. So when the president announced his new South Central Asia strategy that focused on not just Afghanistan, but also India, and then also incorporating Pakistan into that as sort of a regional approach. The key element of that is eventually getting Afghans to talk to Afghans. And that would certainly include the Taliban, getting them to talk to one another. We don't see the long-term solution in Afghanistan as being a military solution. That's a tool that unfortunately has to be used. But ultimately, the Afghans are going to have to want to come to the peace table.
So then is the U.S. pushing Qatar to close the Taliban office in Doha?
So there's been a lot of talk about this. No decisions have been made. I just want to let you all know something. I was informed today that even though there's talk about an office, that there's not actually an office, that there's not an office space, but it's really just a presence, a Taliban presence there. So all of that is under consideration right now.
So when Qatar says that the Taliban presence in Doha is with the full knowledge and consent of the U.S. government, consent being the key word there, is that an accurate statement? You guys have given your consent for the Taliban to have a presence there?
I'm not aware of how that was all initially worked out. I think that was done quite a few years ago, so I just don't have the details on that.
But if you still think there needs to be reconciliation, then why would there even be a consideration about asking them to prevent really the one place where the international community is able to come together, potentially with the Taliban, to discuss some type of reconciliation?
So we've been now in that war for 16 years. For quite a few years, they've had some sort of presence there. Obviously, they've not been able to come to any kind of peace and reconciliation. So just by having folks sit around in Qatar and probably a pretty cushy life there in Qatar has not demonstrated, has not brought to the table any kind of significant peace efforts.
What's the difference between an office and a presence?
Presence would be like people on the ground, and an office would be, an office space.
Well, I know, but I mean, what is the difference? An office, a presence is a room with a table and one chair, and an office has got like 3 or 4 chairs.
I was told today by our experts on this. I've not been there to have inspected it, but I've told that there's not an actual 4 walls in an office.
And just one other little issue. The Senator Cardin has sent a letter to the administration specifically about this email with Jared Kushner's, issue with Jared Kushner's emails. And they want to know basically whether U.S. foreign policy is being conducted on private email, an issue this building is intimately familiar with from recent years, both in terms of Kushner perhaps discussing foreign policy with other countries, but also potentially with officials here at the State Department. Can you say what your response is to the letter, or what the response is to the substance of those questions?
Yeah, so I can only just say that we've received that letter. I don't know how long ago that letter arrived. It might have just been in the past day or so. So if we have anything further for you on that, I'll just have to update you.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Let's just one last question, and then we got to go. Somebody had something.
Really, Palestinian-Israeli issue.
Who would wait? Hold on. Okay. Russia. Okay.
So Russian officials have been repeatedly raising what they call a break-in by U.S. officials or the FBI in the San Francisco facility. Can you just explain what happened there?
So October 1st was the day in which we had, in fact, graciously given the Russian government, because we learned that they had families who were living in some of these buildings. They had some individuals who were apparently living in this sort of office-type space. Once we learned that, we then offered them extra time there to pack up their items and leave. So we permitted them living in the apartments until October 1st, and their time was up. So that's basically what happened, and that's about it.
Did U.S. officials break locks?
No. Okay. We did not break locks. No FBI involved. This is diplomatic security along with the Foreign Missions Office. What they do is they just walk through, look around. The purpose of that is to make sure that people are no longer living there, and they conducted that and they completed it.
What do you think about Russia giving North Korea now another portal to the internet?
I want to stay on Russia and not delve into North Korea, and we've got to wrap it up. But we've seen that report. We don't know exactly what exists with that relationship yet. We haven't confirmed it independently, so I don't want to comment and say that, yes, we know of this channel that is taking place, because we just haven't investigated it yet. We just learned about it. So I just don't want to speculate beyond that.
I know you want to get off, but there's a lot that's happened since you last briefed, and I know there's some colleagues of mine from Spain who are eager to ask about Catalonia and your response to the referendum and potentially what the violence there. So do you have anything to say about that? That's one.
We're all in Matt's time. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about the Catalonia?
You weren't going to give me a list of things?
No, that would.
I felt like you were giving me a honey-do list or something.
I'm going to take them one at a time.
Okay.
They're all brief.
Okay.
Regarding with that, did you approve the handling of the Spanish government on last Sunday?
Do
you approve or disapprove the way the Spanish government handled the referendum with the heavy crackdown on voters and all that? Do you accept? Would you think it would be a good idea an international mediation to try to solve this crisis that is spinning out of control?
So I'm not going to comment on any international mediation, all of that. But I will say that we were saddened by reports that we've seen and the reports that we've heard of the many people who were injured during the events over the weekend. We continue to say, and last week we said this, let me reiterate it once again, we encourage all parties to resolve their political differences non-violently and in a way that is consistent with Spanish law.
Okay. Number two.
Yeah.
Just on your opening statement about the UN, the Human Rights Council vote,
yes.
Are you saying? Did you mean to say in your, or is it accurate to take what you said that as a sign that had this resolution simply been about the death penalty for LGBT individuals and people accused of apostasy, blasphemy, adultery, that you would have voted for it? In other words, that you are opposed, as you said, to the imposition of the death penalty for those things, but that you also, had it not been this broader anti-death penalty resolution, you would vote in favor of a resolution that was narrowly tailored to those.
We would certainly be against. The United States clearly has the death penalty, both at the state and at the federal level. That is why we voted against this. As this vote, and as that, I don't have the exact language of the.
I can read it to you. I got it right here.
I don't have it in front of me, so but I can just say that if they wanted to apply the death penalty for homosexuality, blasphemy, adultery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we would absolutely oppose the use of the death penalty in those cases. Right. As Americans, we promote democracy and human rights, and those are a part of our values that we share in our hearts as Americans, and that's something that we do each and every day here from the State Department in promoting those values.
Okay, I think you've answered that then. And the last one, have you been able to find the maps of the West Bank to find out how much of it the administration believes
sir,
is
I haven't.
Really?
I have not.
Do you have an answer to the question? How much of the West Bank does the U.S.
I don't.
Could I squeeze in a really quick?
Guys, we gotta go. We gotta go. Oh.
Very quickly.
We're done. We wrapped it up. Saeed, we can talk after. We can talk after. Yeah. Okay.
All right, folks. Thank you very much for joining us and choosing us as your stream of choice. That was Heather Nauert, press briefing from the State Department. We're going to be uploading a few videos. President Donald Trump is still in Puerto Rico. He's at some events and he's talking to people and he's surveying the area, making sure that everybody's getting all of the necessary supplies and necessities. So President Trump is out there handing out food, handing out supplies. So we're going to be uploading that on the channel in just a few minutes. Also, we have this video that we're going to be uploading pretty soon. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and click the notification bell. We have video of a tour of the room, okay, at the Mandalay Bay, and before the incident happened. But we have a video that they did of the tour of the room. I think it's like 236, room 236, at the Mandalay Bay, where the shooter did his despicable thing. And so it's like a surveying the room. And it shows basically the whole thing. And we also have pictures of some of the weapons that were found within the room. So we're going to be uploading that soon. And make sure you guys stay tuned for that. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Jen. I'm from Golden State Times. And I'll see you soon. Peace.